Well, open up your Bible with me if you would. We've been in the book of Revelation. It's where we've been hanging out. We're preaching a series called If This Is the End. If This Is the End. It's really been a guide for us to stewarding the last days. And this Revelation series has been less left behind and more discipleship oriented. Of going, hey, if this was the end of days, if this was kind of the last moments you had here on earth, what kind of person would you want to be? Who would you want to be? What would you want to emit? What fragrance would you want to give off? And I want to preach a message today that I'm calling cutting through. Cutting through. Revelation chapter 2, verse 12 reads like this. It says, "Write this letter to the angel of the church in Pergamum. This is the message from the one with a sharp two-edged sword." So as we've said, but if you're new, the book of Revelation was given to John and he was writing it, and it was really a message to 7 churches, the churches in Asia Minor. So now we find ourselves listening in on what Jesus wanted to say to Pergamum. He says, "I know that you live in the city where Satan has his throne." You think you live in a difficult place. He says, "Yet you have remained loyal to me. You refused to deny me even when Antipas, my faithful witness, was martyred among you there in Satan's city. But I have a few complaints against you. You tolerate some among you whose teaching is like that of Balaam, who showed Balak how to trip up the people of Israel. He taught them to sin by eating food offered to idols and by committing sexual sin. In a similar way, you have some Nicolaitans among you who follow the same teaching. Repent of your sin, or I will come to you suddenly and fight against them with the sword of my mouth," which is his word. Verse 17 says, "Anyone with ears to hear must listen to the Spirit and understand what he is saying to the churches. To everyone who is victorious, I will give some of the manna that has been hidden away in heaven. And I will give to each one of you a white stone, and on the white stone will be engraved a new name that no one understands except the one who receives it." Cutting through. Let's pray together today over the preaching of God's word. God, I thank you so much for your word. And I pray, God, that you would use it to speak to us in a profound way today. Help us to discern the difference between all the voices that would fill our ears. And may your voice be by far the loudest one we hear. We love you, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Have you ever had a revelation, or have you ever had a fact that kind of just hits you like a ton of bricks? It's like something that for some reason there's a moment where you have a realization that, oh man, this is my new reality. Well, I remember I had one of these moments. I've had one of these moments a couple different times, but especially after Christina and I had children. I remember, there was a noise. We heard something, right? We heard something in the house. And now, when you were a kid, right? When you were a kid and you heard something in the house, or maybe you were a college student and you had roommates, right? And you heard something in the house, your first response would be to go get whoever is the ultimate authority in the house. And now if you're in college, you go get the toughest guy in the apartment, right? And so that would be, when you were a kid, that's what you got to do. So you would hear something in the house, or you'd hear something in your room, and you would go to your parents' room, and you'd be like, "Dad, something is happening, and I heard a noise," and you would go to the ultimate authority. It is a weird realization for a man when there is no place to go. It is a fascinating realization because I have a very creative mind. And by creative mind, what I mean really is that I just got to watch horror movies when I was a child. That's what I mean. And so when I hear a noise, it's not a potential intruder, it's Freddy Krueger. You know what I mean? Like, when I hear a noise, it's not the ice machine, it's Jason coming back. Jason number 14. You know what I mean? And so it is a weird, like, I remember having that weird realization that I heard a noise and like, and come on, and no dude wants to go, "Hey babe, I heard a noise." You know what I mean? Like, not if you ever want your wife to look at you the same way. You know what I mean? And so I remember having, and I had this realization, wow, I am the last line of authority. I am the one that has to get up and go check on the noise to see, okay, is this noise, is it benign? Is it the ice maker? Is it something that kind of fell? Like, what is this noise? Is it benign or is it a threat? And what you have to understand for your own life is that you, not anybody else, not me, not your city group leader, not your husband, not your wife, you are the last line of defense when it comes to the voices that you are allowing to penetrate your mind and your heart. You are the last line of defense. You can't go tap somebody on the shoulder and says, hey, I heard something. You can't like pass it off. You yourself are the last line of defense. My spirit, my responsibility. You are the last line of defense. And we live in a culture, man, where there are a ton of voices. There's external voices, there's internal voices. There's voices that want to encourage you. There's voices that actually mean you harm. And what we have to understand is we got to understand the context that Jesus steps into the church of Pergamum. Now, what's interesting about Pergamum is it is the most illustrious city that we are going to talk about during these 7 weeks. It's not the biggest city. It's not the most beautiful city, but it is the most illustrious. And in fact, when John writes this, Pergamum has already been the capital city of Asia for 300 years. And so it has that kind of clout that a capital city has. You think of a city like Washington, D.C. now, right? Washington, D.C. is not the biggest city. It's not the prettiest city. But when you go there, you feel it. When you go there, you experience it and you go, oh, this is unique. And Pergamum had that type of reputation about it. And the reason why it was so illustrious is for two reasons. One is it had, at that time, the largest library in the known world at that time. In fact, they had over 200,000 books in their library. Now, that's pretty modest. But at the time, you got to think about this. They had to handwrite every single edition, every single copy that would have been in that library. And so they had over 200,000 books. And so there would be all kinds of, philosophical books and all kinds of ideas and all kinds of thoughts that were permeating in this city at that time. The other reason why it was such an illustrious city is that it really was an epicenter for religious activity. Not just Christianity, but for religious activity in general. And so that is the context that Jesus steps in to this situation. And essentially what Jesus says to the church in Pergamum is he says, hey, you have a lot of voices. You have a lot of voices. You have a lot of things that would want to lean against you and to shape the way you think. And the reality is if something can shape the way we think, then it can shape the way we live. Because you think long before you live. You're processing long before you're acting. And so Jesus says, hey, there is a lot going on. And I think our problem, honestly, is we are addicted to noise. We are addicted to, we gotta have noise around. You ever find yourself walking in your house and like turn on your TV? And you're like, I'm not even watching anything, just the TV's on. In fact, this is one of the most interesting things. In fact, you ever been in this situation and you try to resist, but have you ever heard two people talking about a situation and you're not involved in the conversation, but you really want to know what they're talking about? And you're like, I know a very, wise, and I know a person that is like socially aware would not ask. So I'm not going to ask. I'm not going to ask. I'm not going to ask. And you try to, like, every fiber in your being is like, but you can't even help yourself. Like, what? What are you guys talking about? It's like we got to know information. Come on, we live in a culture now where our goal is to just like amass information. That's why we can't even just have a time on the toilet anymore. Remember when you used to be able to go to the bathroom and not look at something, you just sit there? Those were the days where we'd be in and out. Now we're hanging out. It's like 30 minutes later. You're like, man, I got caught up in this article. I'm sorry. I was reading this book. I'm sorry. Why? Because information. We can't even rest anymore. Why? Because we need information. We need the noise. And my question to you is this: is the noise serving you? Is it serving you? Like, do you feel like you're a healthier person? do you even feel like you have more information? Wait, you ever feel like the more information you get, the less information you have? Like I feel like the more articles I read, the more confused I am. I'm like, I actually felt pretty good until I started reading all this stuff, and now I'm kind of like, I don't know what to do. So here's my point, my only point. And I think now, I got to be honest, I'm a little embarrassed about this big idea. I just got to say it. I have to say it because I can't read it with a straight face. Here's why I can't read it with a straight. I don't know if it's because I'm listening to C.S. Lewis right now, audiobook, but this is like a haiku, if you will. And this is not my style if you go to our church. It's a little bit of a poem. Are you ready? You ready? It's a little bit of a poem. Here you go. It's the fortune cookie vibes. Here you go. With little thought, we bend our ear towards every sound we think we hear. A little bit of a haiku today. I'm feeling, we're recording music and writing haikus. It's a special day at Grace City Church. But come on, isn't this true? With just little thought, we're just, what? I'm sorry, what? We just bend our ear towards every little noise, not even understanding, is this even something I should hear? Is this even something I should entertain? Is this good for my soul? And in Revelation chapter 2, this is what Jesus says to the church in Pergamum. First of all, he says, this is the message from the one with the sharp two-edged sword, which is in reference to his word. He said, I know you live in a city where Satan has his throne, yet you have remained loyal to me. You refuse to deny me, even when Antipas, my faithful witness, was martyred among you there in Satan's city. It is amazing what we can underestimate. It's amazing what we can underestimate. In fact, oftentimes when I'm meeting with somebody and we're talking about some things in their life that are kind of going off kilter and their life isn't what they want it to be, or they're dealing with maybe some sort of anxiety or depression, or they're navigating just the everyday throes of life that we all have to navigate. To be honest, I always start at the basics first. Because you can never live the life that God wants you to live if you're not under his operating system. Right? So let me give you an example. So the place I always start is this. I always ask people, how's your sleep pattern? What kind of sleep are you getting? Is it sporadic? Is it all over the place? Like I was talking to a creative one time, and they're like, I just don't feel like I'm creative anymore. I'm like, what time are you going to bed? 4 a.m. Okay, cool. So you're tired all the time. So how can you be creative when you're tired all the time? I know I can't be creative when so I ask people, okay, like how's your sleep pattern? Here's another question. Like, how are you eating? What's your diet look like? Right? Like, how does it, here's another one. Are you ever breaking a sweat besides walking up the steps? You know what I mean? Like, are you ever are you ever breaking a sweat? Is that ever happen? And the reason is, it doesn't mean that everything comes down to those three things. It just means you have to get under the right operating system so you can go anywhere. And so what's interesting is it's amazing what you and I can underestimate. And I find this fascinating that if you're in this room and you're following Jesus, it's wild to me how a believer can underestimate the Word of God. It's fascinating to me how we can underestimate the very words of God. In fact, so far with these churches, God has always kind of come to them, right? We've done 4 of them now, and God has always, 3. God has always come, and he's always said, here's what you're going through, but here's something about my nature and my character that ought to give you some confidence, right? So if you remember, right, in Ephesus, he said this, I hold this against you that you've forgotten your first love. And so what does he tell him about his nature before he says, hey, you've forgotten your first love? He says that he holds the church in his hand and that he walks among the church. That his nature is, hey, I am the ultimate authority. I have control over the whole situation, and my presence is with you. When it comes to the church of Smyrna that we talked about last week, what do you say? Hey, you're afraid to die. You're living in a very tumultuous place to be a Christian. So he encourages them with this, that he is the first and the last, and that he conquered death. And in this situation, he's saying, hey, you have a lot of voices. And so the first thing he encourages them with is, hey, the word is here. The word is here. So anytime you're navigating something and anytime you're going through something, you got to go back to the nature of who God says he is. So when you're navigating something in life that's not really working out or not playing out the way that you thought it was, you got to go back and go, right, but do I know God the way that I should know God? Do I know his nature? Do I know who he is? Do I know how he works? And he says, hey, guys, you don't just live in a place where Satan exists, but it's the place where Satan has authority. Now, what's interesting, this is a really fascinating study here, because the Greek word that's usually used anytime in the New Testament when it talks about a Christian dwelling anywhere, the word that's used every other time except for this time is sojourner. Right? It's the word sojourner, right? And so when we think about the scriptures and we think about what it is to be a Christian, right? The Bible, a huge theme of the Bible is that this world is not our home. Right, that we are sojourners, that this is not our final destination, that we are passing by. What's interesting is this moment here is the only time when it talks about the Christian dwelling anywhere that the Greek word that's used actually has to do with residence in a permanent place. It's the only time in the whole scripture where when Jesus is talking about what it is to be a Christian residing in a place, that he's not talking about a sojourner. He's talking about, hey, you're a resident in a personal place, in a permanent place. And here's what Jesus was saying. Jesus was saying, hey, look, I'm not going to let you off the hook so easily. You have to decide that you are in a place where Satan dwells, but as long as you have the community you have, and as long as you have my word in you, you can actually flourish in an environment where Satan actually dwells. Which is why it bothers me when we complain about our jobs. Oh man, that was too real. It got real quiet there. It's why it bothers me when we complain about where we live, that it bothers me when we're in environments, because I'm like, wait, if you're in this room and you're following God, you can flourish anywhere. You can flourish in any environment. You should be able to flourish in any context. And so I wonder if Jesus would come to you today and say, hey, I'm not going to use the sojourner language with you. I'm not going to use the, hey, I'm going to let you off the hook someday. I'm going to use the, nope, you're there planted in a permanent place where Satan dwells. But hey, you got my word. You have my word. And if you have my word, and if you have like a community, you should be able to flourish in any environment you're in. The believer can exist anywhere armed with community and his word, but you better get good at noise cancellation. You better get really, really good at noise cancellation. You better get really good at knowing how to take every thought captive and make it obedient to Christ. Because this is what he says. He says, hey, you're doing pretty good. You're living where Satan dwells. You're equipped with my word. But I have a few complaints against you. And he says, you tolerate some among you. And he talks about the teachings of Balaam, and he talks about the teachings of the Nicolaitans. So he goes, you tolerate. It's interesting, because I really believe this. I think you live in the world you tolerate. Yeah. I think you live in the world you tolerate. I remember when I first I first moved to Lakeland, and I was the campus pastor at SEU, and it's always weird when you inherit a staff. It's always an interesting dynamic when you take a job and there's people that work there before you, and they work for you, but like they work for you, but they don't work for you. You know what I mean? If you've ever had any of this sort of transitional moment in life, and so I remember I was meeting with this guy, and we were sitting down there, and we were talking, and I was sharing ideas of some things that we were going to try, some things hey, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and da-da-da. It's amazing to see some of that stuff still happening, and when I would say it, I would say an idea, and this is like the most awkward conversation ever. We're sitting right there, and I'd say, oh man, we're gonna do this, and he'd go, just like that. He'd go, just like that. And now every time he did, now I'm not afraid of awkward moments. I live for awkward moments. I love awkward moments. And so every time I had an idea and he went, I went, why'd you do that? Why'd you do that? And he was like, well, we've tried that before and da-da-da-da. This probably happened. This is not an exaggeration. This probably happened like 6 times in a 30-minute meeting in which I said something and he went, just like that. That's smirk and everything. I can see it in my mind right now. And every time, why'd you do that? Hold on, let's go back. Why'd you just do that? And every single time, I corrected it and I stopped it. And like literally like 45 minutes after the meeting, he handed in his letter of resignation. It made sense. Like, this is not going to work for either of us. Just as sometimes he has these moments. My son, I love him. He's the sweeter one, but when he loses it all the way. And there are times where he's at the house where he wants to do something. And I think because my mom says it, who's sitting right over here, I think because my mom says it now, our kids do this thing where they say, I'm not playing your game. And that's cute when we're joking. When we're not joking, pray for your boy. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and sometimes he'll do this thing where he wants something and he'll just start flipping. I don't know if any other kids do that. I'm sure they do. I'm going to assume they do, so I don't feel like a bad parent. They do, right? Okay, cool. And he'll freak out. There's times where he's hitting his head. I'm like, bro, this is like crazy. And every time, I'll get down with him. I'm like, look at me. Like, and he's looking at me. He's like, and he's doing that. Like, dude, look at me. Breathe. Look at me. Why? Because I'm just not going to tolerate that. Doesn't mean he's not going to do it for a while. Doesn't mean it's not going to be, but I'm not going to tolerate it. I wonder what you and I tolerate. You get the life you tolerate. And you hear the voices you tolerate. And you live out the voices you allow to stay around you. Some of you, like you complain about the same toxic people you hang out with every week. Like you complain about the advice that you get from people that you keep going to. Like you're like, oh, I'm gonna give them another go. See if they stumbled on any good advice this time. Probably not. Why? Because you hear the voices you tolerate. You get the life that you and I tolerate. And I love that Jesus says, hey, you tolerate all these other voices. In both of these situations, I had to set a precedent for what was tolerated. And what you tolerate becomes your new normal. And Jesus says, hey, you're tolerating these voices, and I have this against you. See, you got to be careful. One of the primary gods that was worshipped in Pergamum, they had a logo, which I'm like, man, even church back in the day had a logo. That's cool. But one of the gods that was worshipped, not the god, but a god that was worshipped in Pergamum, they had a logo, and the logo was a serpent, right? The logo was a snake. And so one of the practices of this religion is that they would go into the darkness of these temples and they would let snakes like crawl around them. And now these were snakes that they had like depoisoned and stuff. So they couldn't kill you, but the thought was that just them crawling around you and them touching you would provide healing. Now obviously we know that that's not true. But what's interesting is I wonder how people would feel like when they got out of there and they just had that experiment, that experience. Because how many of you know you don't have to be bit by something to be infected by something? You don't have to be bit to be infected. You might not have markings on your body, but you have results in your soul. You might not be able to go, oh, this is exactly, you might not even be able to put your finger on it. You might not even be able to say, this is exactly what happened, but for some reason, there's some interactions and there's some people and there's some voices that you're listening to that are marking your soul, and it's even hard for you to put your finger on, but it's because just you and I are not paying enough attention. And we're going in dark places and we're just letting snakes crawl all around us. And we leave and we're wondering, why am I upset all the time? Why am I easily prone to anger? Why am I why am I insecure? Why am I bitter? Why am I this? Why am I that? Oh, you can't see the bite markings, but they've happened. They've happened. And this is why you got to be careful what voices are going on in your life. And then in verse 17, I want to end with this. I want to have the team come up. Because he says this, he says, anyone with ears to hear must listen to the Spirit and understand what he is saying to the churches. And then he says, to everyone who's victorious, meaning everyone who listens to the right voice, he's going to get some manna that has been hidden away in heaven. They're going to get a white stone, and they're going to get a new name that no one understands except the one who receives it. So he says, hey, if you listen to the right voices, you're going to get hidden manna. Right now, hidden manna is the voice that causes you to hunger after eternal things. Like, come on, aren't you grateful that you have some people in your life in a church like Grace City that causes you to hunger after eternal things? By the way, there's all kinds of other voices that want to get you to hunger after very earthly things, very temporary things. And he says, hey, you're going to get a white stone, and the white stone is the voice encouraging you to accept his invitation. Come on, aren't you grateful that you have some voices in your life that just encourage you, hey, just submit this to Jesus. God cares about this. God knows this. And then aren't you grateful that God wants to give you a new name if you listen to the right voice? Because it's the voice helping you be the truer version to who God created you to be. But you got to listen to the right voices. Here's why. People give you advice based on what they're going for. You got to understand that. So you have to want what they're going for if you want to listen to their voice. Not just what they have, but what they're going for. Like I remember going to Dylan Bailey. He's a guy, goes to our church. They just had their first kid, which is pretty special. And they had a cool journey, and God just did a miracle. It's just unbelievable. Love Dylan and Haley. And Dylan was in the team portion of the CrossFit Games this last year, like the big one. They made it to like the one on ESPN, all that good stuff. And so he looks like it. So I immediately don't really like him that much, to be honest. And so one time I came to him, I'm like, hey, Dylan, can you show me how to work out a little bit? Like, can you, I want to work out. Can you work me out for a little bit just so I can kind of like learn how to work out? Now, you got to think about this. Dylan and I have very different body types. I'm using that term to be generous to myself. Dylan's shorter than me. He's thick, he's jacked, and I'm like tall and not jacked. And so what I told him is this. Now listen, I had to tell him this because Dylan and I are going for two different things. We both want to be in shape, but I want to be able to shoot a basketball. He don't care if he can shoot a basketball, although he's pretty good at basketball too. Never mind. I'm done with this illustration. So I told him, I said, Dylan, I'm not trying to be like thick. I'm trying to be like lean and just like cut up. I want to see like some definition here, some definition here, like that. That's what I'm not trying to be like. I'm not trying to be the CrossFit Games. I'm trying to. Why? Because I told him, hey, I had to tell him this is what I'm going for. And he goes, oh, okay, I can do that. Because I didn't want him giving me advice based on what he's going for. Because people instinctively will always give you advice based on what they're going for. And so you got to pay attention and stop listening to people that are going for very different things than you. Can I just encourage you? Can I just step on all the toes for a second? I mean, I do it anyway. I'm going to do it. You know what I mean? I ask because it's funny. Can I just encourage you? Like, I don't care if it's right wing, left wing, whatever. Like, the media's not your friend, bro. I don't know if you caught that yet. You want to know why? Because they want different things than you. They don't want the same things as you. Or let me say it this way. They don't want the same things that you should want if you follow Jesus. It's a better way of saying it. They don't want the same things as you. Single people in the room. Stop listening to your friends, carrying on and trying to have worldly relationships. They don't want the same thing as you. So how can they model what you want? marriages. Stop just like following like people that you see from afar, but you don't really know their marriage. And you're kind of like, oh man, I can't believe that didn't work. What do you mean you can't believe that didn't work out? You don't know them. There's some amazing people in this church that want the same things you want to go, I want to model after that. What do you want? There are ways to get what you want, but you first have to decide, what is it that I want? And what I want is I want manna from heaven. I want the things that God gives, that sustains and nourishes, that only God can give. What do I want? I want that white stone. I want to accept the invitation of Jesus Christ to say, God, I want to bend my ear towards heaven. What do I want? God, I want the real name you have for me. The most authentic version of me that you've created me to be. That's what I want. And then the only voices I'm going to listen to are people that also want that. Come on, church, let's stand to our feet.